All right. So today we're going to talk about the Constitution. 3 ways: the Convention to have a new form of government, compromises to create the Constitution, and ratification or approval of the Constitution. Now, I will warn you right now. Especially for the end of the day on a Monday. This lecture is a couple things. Thing one, it is much more technical than it is like a storytelling piece. What I mean by that is like it's not a whole bunch of super exciting stuff going on, but there's a lot of very important specifics that I'm going to need everybody in this room to be 100% on board with when you walk out that door, because every single thing we do after today in class will come off of, in one way, shape, or form, off of today's conversation. Right? The Articles of Confederation lasted us like 6.5 years and we scrap it. The Constitution has lasted us from 1789 until today. It's a long time. Moral of the story, if you don't understand the foundational pieces of government, then all the social change, the political change, the economic change, everything that comes next will only make kind of sense. So I'm acknowledging up front, like I'm going to make this as entertaining as I can, but it's not a storytelling type of lecture. It's more of a technical piece about like where power lies, why power lies there, how the Constitution is set up. So it's a pretty important day, but it's also not the most like thrilling and exhilarating of days. Those will come next, I promise. Once we get to that later, like starting Thursday, into period 4, it gets more like engaging content-wise, but today is vitally important in order to even like access that stuff later. Make sense? So I'm giving you fair warning. I'm asking you for full cooperation and onboardedness. Let's talk about it. Your prompt is here. Kevin Scott. Can you put my clipboard off Maltez's desk? It has my notes for today. Kevin Scott, nice and loud, baby. Like you mean it. Yeah, clear that throat, Kevin Scott. Yeah, you'll see it. That's like today's notes, but my handwriting all over it. Louder, Kevin Scott.
Evaluate the extent to which the Constitution can be labeled a bundle of compromises.
Cool. It was on your reading question as well, but we'll get there today. Where there's 3 key compromises I'll need you to know after today. With a 4th being the Bill of Rights, which is also quite important. Your outline is here. First, I about the need for new government. I kind of got to this at the very tail end of Thursday with the terrible economic situation and Shays' Rebellion. We'll talk about the principles of a republic, how they put those. You guys identified these last Wednesday, this list of principles that are super important that we see as our like ingredient list. We'll talk about compromises in the Constitution. We'll talk about structures of the new government. We'll talk about ratification and our new warring or opposing factions, Federalists and Anti-Federalists. And at the end of today, we will hit the Bill of Rights. And then we can actually get into what happens with our new government starting on Thursday. I'll be in a little bit late on Thursday, probably. So your beginning of class is text heavy so that I can lecture the second half of class. So I just move things around a little bit so that way like we don't fall behind. I'm be in and out all day for this training downtown, and I'm trying to avoid it at all costs. But I'll be in a little late because I have to go to the beginning of the training, and then I'll be in to give you the second half lecture. Then I'm going back to training, then I'm coming back for first period. It's gonna be a crazy day. But I'm just telling you on Thursday, when I'm not here, you need to do like your text and reading stuff. I put the text together. It's very straightforward and user friendly. I don't care who the sub is. Like you need to hold yourselves accountable to what's going on and get through it, because otherwise you're the ones who are behind, and your test is a week from Thursday anyway. Cool. Yeah, so your test is a week from Thursday. Then we're now period 2 and 3, and we're in business. I know. Whoa. All right, so take a minute and talk to your partner to the effect of this question. When the founding generation, right, that John Adams is, and that Thomas Jefferson's, and that Thomas Paine, who writes Common Sense, that generation, when they declared independence, what was their biggest fear? When they declared independence, what was their biggest fear? 1 minute, talk to your partner, go. Can I erase this? Their biggest fear was what? What do you say? Yeah, kind of.
I think it's kind of like an imbalance.
Then I still like just centralized government, but very like, what about it?
Because I have something just like that. I think that kind of what like they work and it becomes separate. To like make sure that the system, make sure that people have like can express their like ideas, have like all of this not being able to build not being able to like run the people.
One word
show
answer.
that like they have control. We're not control, which is like
We already said it in class.
the country that we live in, and that they totally apart.
Good. 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 So, what is the thing? What is the thing that they are most afraid of? Sure. Be a little more specific. The power of the government's too vague. Because you're right. I know where you're going with it, but I want you to be more specific. Okay. What's too much government power called? You have to help him out. What's too much government power called? I swear to God, this fool just stares at me like something's growing on my face. He just looks at me like, what? Come on, Nieto. Kill us with that knowledge, big dog. Tyranny! Don't ask, tell me. Good. Good. Tyranny? Yeah, so is it safe to say that like Thomas Jefferson in writing the Declaration of Independence, Thomas Paine in writing Common Sense, John Adams in writing his thoughts on government, all three texts that you've read already in this class, just in the last week and a half, I think it's safe to say that the thing they fear the most is tyranny. So because they fear tyranny so much, what do? What? They distribute the power to who? Ah, thank you. To the states and to the people. Good. Good job, guys. To the states and to the people. I like how you put that. They distribute the power away from a centralized government and give power to the states, and they give power to the people. And then back to our do now quote, then we see the abuse of liberty. That liberty, your freedoms get endangered by your own abuse of freedoms. Think about your own life for a second. Y'all teenagers, y'all make terrible decisions. Oh yeah, I know. I still act like a teenager sometimes. It's all good. Now, if you have some freedom, and you abuse that freedom, what happens? Yeah. You lose that freedom, right? If your mom is like, all right, it's Friday night, you can go out, you can go to the movies, your boyfriend or girlfriend, but you make sure you're home by 10 o'clock. 12, all right, cool, because you're like the 17, nobody cares about you. He's like, it's true. Home by 10, and then I don't know who you go to the movies with, but and you come with Nieto maybe, and you come home and it's 11:15. When you said you're home by 10, what happens to your freedom next time? Hell nah! You're not going anywhere. You told me you're back at 10 o'clock last time. You didn't come back at 10 o'clock. Oh, it was a long movie. I don't care. You abused your liberty. So liberty is abused. Liberty can be lost by the abuse of liberty. So if anything, what's going to happen, and this is kind of my next slide, but I want to talk about it without slides so you guys can pay attention for a second. By the 1780s, so 1 decade, after living with the Articles of Confederation for 6 or 7 years, we are far less concerned about tyranny. And we are far more concerned with what? With what? Kind of. What's our biggest, if tyranny was our biggest fear, what's now our biggest fear? Too much liberty, sure. I'm going to call it this because it's a better A-push term. Mob rule. That we are worried that we've given these stupid people too much power, and we assumed they could handle the power. And in reality, they could not. Now, last week you read John Adams' thoughts on government, and he told you these are the 2 characteristics needed for a republic to be successful. What were those 2 characteristics? I know, Thursday was a long time ago. 4 whole days. What?
Is it the one where he talks about how they should rule with honor?
Yes. Honor and?
I don't remember.
It's a V word.
Huh?
It's a V word. Honor and, because you're right, that's the one. Honor and virtue. Honor and virtue. And Adam says, like, if we're going to let the people decide, but the people are all virtuous, and the people all hold themselves to a high moral standard. That the people, like, to be virtuous is to think about more than just yourself. To think about the common good. To think about what's good for society as a whole. The problem becomes, men are stupid. Sorry, boys, I hate to tell you. you're dumb. You are genetically predisposed to being dumb as hell. That's a fact. I asked my wife. It's true. Just jokes. But what do men, and Adam said this, a single assembly is liable to grow ambitious and vote themselves perpetual. A single assembly is liable to all the vices of an individual, fits of rage and passion and jealousy. So the idea is that we've given too much power to the people without enforcing the idea that we have to make sure that we pick honorable and virtuous people to put in charge of things. So what I asked you in your first question is what changes? How do we go at the beginning of the American Revolution to being so terrified of tyranny that we created a government system in which the government actually had like negative power? To the late Articles of Confederation period in which we are willing as a society to create a government that has ultimate power and ultimate supremacy in the national government. That's a huge shift. Maybe we could even say it is a revolution. So in the 1770s, American political leaders see tyranny as the greatest threat. But by the mid-1780s, literally 9 years later, they've gone all the way the other direction. Ordinary citizens, everyday people, the people like you, the people like I, who have no virtue, no ability to think about bigger than just themselves as the greatest threat to society. So my question asks you, how do they evolve? That's pretty straightforward. But the next question is why? How they shift from seeing tyranny as a threat to seeing everyday citizens with no virtue as a threat. That's the how. That's the shift. I want you to take a minute and talk to your partner about why. This kind of cleans up the end of Thursday's conversation. Why do people change their threat, their enemy, from tyranny to mob rule? 1 minute, talk to your partner, get that question done when we go. Dive in.
Because like they always saw like how shitty the Confederation was, and like how they kind of saw like this, so we tried to do this, and it didn't work out at all. They just kind of saw like the consequences that it had on society, on these revolutions, and really, so they were kind of just like okay, you had, like you said, like it's like back to the strategy that they were so much better, like trying to make the right things, so they kind of like saw their way
They put more fear from tyranny into more fear from tyranny into
Don't do that. Don't do that to yourself. All right. Let me stop you guys there. And I heard some good things. I know, I like your answer. Jake, Mr. Lopez. Why? Why do they shift?
They shift because they realize that mob rule sucks, but also tyranny is a really bad system. So they have to find that middle ground. It's still not a great system, but it's way better than both of those.
Okay, sure. Right, did they realize that maybe we need a little more structure? That maybe we thought a little bit too highly of people. Maybe we assume people can make good decisions, when in reality, people can't make good decisions. I deal with high schoolers for a living, and Montes who acts like a high schooler. and it's if I just assume you guys were going to do your homework because it's the virtuous thing to do, would you do your homework? If I stopped collecting homework, how many of you would still do your homework? Exactly. So what I have to do is I have to assign homework, and then I have to create a system to hold you accountable. Otherwise, you're like, man, screw that guy. He's going to just lecture in class. You know, it's all going to make pretty good sense. I'll be all right. You won't be all right. Always do your reading. Portillo. So that's the key, is if we assume people will just make good decisions, they won't, because people suck. Think about your entire group of friends. Think about every person you hang out with. Some of you, that's one person.
Yeah.
Some of y'all, that's 9. Cool, we get it. You have friends. You're not special. And think, how many of those people are virtuous humans that make decisions for the common good, that think big picture? How many of them? Think about your friends. How many of you would consider Kevin Nieto here a friend? Okay, good. You guys are all good. That's good. Wise like this. I like that. Well done. Good. Why do I ask you that? Because it proves the point that, like, in everyday citizenry, in everyday citizens, there's a lot of idiots. There's a lot. Think about your dumbest friend. Think about your. Should I? If you don't have a dumbest friend, you are the dumb friend. Think about your dumbest friend and think to yourself that that person's vote counts just as much as yours in America. I know.
Just stop it.
Yeah. So, moral of the story. That's what they see as the biggest threat, is these everyday citizens like you and I who lack virtue. Now the states, they created very weak state governors, we talked about, very weak state governors and a very weak Articles of Confederation. That's what they do when they're scared of tyranny. But on the downside, we see that the problem in America is not the excess of power, the problem is an excess of democracy. We've given the people too much power and God, they can't handle it. And the event that proves this point is Shays' Rebellion. This idea of when the people can't get their way, they're just going to band together, light things on fire, break into courthouses, shut down court systems, break into jails to free their friends, like freeing Robin Hood or something, and people are getting wild. So I have some short and long-term factors that get us to this point, because it's a big shift in 7 years to go from terrified of tyranny to being willing to give a national government power. The year is that's our next forever year, is 1787. We have a couple of years now so far. 1607, 1619, 1620, 1776, 17... I got you guys. And it's this year that becomes the exposure of the fatal flaw. What does it mean to be a fatal flaw? What's fatal mean, the word fatal? Yeah, so these are flaws that are going to kill the Articles of Confederation. Now, what's the biggest long-term problem the newly created United States is facing? From class on Thursday. The very end of class on Thursday. What's the biggest long-term problem they're facing? Money. Yeah, they have debt, economic depression, inflation. All those things are long-term factors. And ever since the revolution, our economy sucks. Why? Because we used to exist in mercantilism, and we could just sell all our stuff to Britain, and we was nice, like having a nice like a safety net. I always compare this to like when you guys move off to college and you'll be on your own for the first time, you realize how hard it is to provide food for yourself. It's crazy. I went to college, I was like, man, I'm so excited. I moved out of my parents' house at 18, I was ready to go. I was like, I'm going to make all my own decisions, I'm going to pay all my own bills, this is going to be great. And then boom, I was broke as shit. It was miserable. I was like, cool, I guess this box of granola bars is about to last me a month. Let's go. Right? It's true. Right? So I was working at a food restaurant like on campus. So I ate at work, and then after that I was like, man, got to keep my phone bill. Got to pay that so I can, use a phone. Back in the day, playing Snake. But the colonists are just like that. They think as soon as we get free of England, we're going to be raking in the dough, trade with everybody. We can't trade with the Spanish because we owe them money. Can't trade with the French because we owe them money. Can't trade with the British because we just kicked them out of North America and we owe them money. So we have this terrible economic situation. Short-term factors in Shays' Rebellion. These tens of thousands of farmers who are losing their farms, being sent to debtor's prison, banding together, marching into Massachusetts towns and burning down courthouses, breaking into jail and freeing their farmer friends who were in jail from owing their money. It's that event as a short-term spark that exposes to the rest of the country that maybe we need to reevaluate the way we're governed in the country. As I told you guys in a class on Thursday, it's hilarious because we have this huge rebellion, and what can we do about it? Nothing, right? Like call the army. What army? Draft an army. We don't have the power to do that. Hire an army. We don't have any money. So it's this terrible. Congress has no funds or the power to even send an army. So we have this huge rebellion happening in Massachusetts, and America's like, man, that's wild. Somebody should do something. Somebody?
It's crazy.
Man, that's crazy over there. You see what's happening in Massachusetts? Somebody should really do something about that. Nobody did. What has to end up happening to put it down is the ruling class, the rich in Massachusetts, bless you, the merchants, the business people, those that live like in the urban areas like Boston, they put their money together and they hire a mercenary army. They hire soldiers for hire to go put down the rebellion. Bless you. And that is a terrible way to have a country, is that every time that you need something to be put down, you have to hire people privately. It's a terrible idea. And it's this Shays Rebellion that gives us our spark that leads us into then having a conversation about government, and that conversation leads us into having a constitution. It's important you guys understand that Shays Rebellion is an important spark because it gives people that were already fonder of having a stronger national government, these conversations were already happening. People like George Washington were already communicating, written letters back and forth about how terrible the country was doing at the time. It's then some events give you the justification to do what you kind of already wanted to do anyway. So a lot of these people are already into fixing the economy and therefore having to fix the government to fix it. People like George Washington, James Madison, Alexander Hamilton, but it's Shays Rebellion that gives them the credibility to their argument. Because they can point to it and say, see, look, we told you guys the government wasn't strong enough, and now we have some evidence to prove it. Your question, Daniel? So first, before the Constitutional Convention, James Madison calls for a meeting in Annapolis. It's called the Annapolis Convention. I'm telling you, things are always named appropriately. And their goal isn't to change the country, not to change the government, not to change the articles. They're trying to fix our trade situation. So if you're ever asked to justify why changing the articles to the Constitution was an economic decision, use the Annapolis Convention as your evidence. Because they're not getting together to fix the political problems. They're not getting together to fix social problems. Their first goal is to fix the fact that the economy is terrible, and we need to find a way to trade with Spain and trade with France and trade with Britain to get that going. The Annapolis Convention is a failure. A huge failure because only 12 delegates show up from 5 states. So they call this convention to try to fix the economy, and only 12 people show up from only 5 states. They accomplish nothing. But what have they done? They've started the conversation. Just like the First Continental Congress, the Second Continental Congress, the Stamp Act, like these things build over time. In this case, it starts the conversation about getting into a conversation about shifting what we're going to do government-wise. The failure of the Annapolis Convention causes Alexander Hamilton, an important name that you'll read a lot about on Thursday, Hamilton to call for another convention, to have another meeting in Philadelphia the next year, where they're going to talk about big picture stuff, like revising or amending the Articles of Confederation. Question: how many votes were needed to amend or change the Articles of Confederation? Yeah, 13. You need 9 to pass a law, which is crazy, and 13 to even change the structure. So is amending the Articles even realistic? No. That's what's going to happen. They're going to get there and realize they're going to burn this whole bad boy down and start over, and that's exactly what happens. So I want you to talk to your partner about this. When I ask you the question, how do the intentional weaknesses of the Articles lead to the Constitution? So I listed for you the weaknesses. And none of these are accidental. These are all intentional. These are all done on purpose. Can't tax. Can't regulate interstate foreign trade. Each state only has 1 vote, regardless of size. You need a 2/3 majority to pass a law. Only unanimous amendments. No executive branch to enforce the law. No national court system to settle legal disputes. And 13 separate states that lack national unity. Take a minute and talk to your partner. How does this weakness, this intentional weakness, that word is in there on purpose. How does this intentional weakness lead to the need for a new government? My point is, like, what's the consequence of all this that leads us to revising the Articles altogether? What made you talk to your partner go? Okay.
Like realize, give some like realization of like what the problem, what kind of problems we're dealing with. You know, like back it up, like the Shays Rebellion. Shays Rebellion.
All right. So, moral of the story, kind of. Michael, how does this intentional weakness create a situation in which we adopt a stronger government?
It shows like it was meant to show people
that they can't do anything. So basically, like, they can't, like, you know how the rebellion started?
Yep.
They can't do anything against it because there's no money like that. So it's like to show why it needs to be like the government.
Okay. I would say, like, go ahead, please jump in.
Me and my partner discussed that they did it intentionally so that everyone else could come to the realization how bad like things were, and therefore come up with a new government with the changes that had to be made.
Sure. Did they think this was going to fail when they made it this way? No. I think they're hoping for the best. But what happens instead is they created a government that was based on what? What's the big emotion that goes into this entire thing? Fear. They created an entire government system based on fear of power. So by doing so, you create a government that lacks any teeth, it has no enforcement ability, it has no power, and that then creates a dynamic in which people can kind of do whatever they want, and that then exposes to everybody that, hey, we need to really shift what we're doing here. Good job, guys. Good conversation. And that's what gives us our Constitution, right? We're scared of central government. We want to keep state power at the state level. States have different needs and interests. So we have a really weak government. But with economic problems and the lack of enforcement capability, then we realize that back to the word that was used earlier, we've got to find a little bit more of a balanced ground. Now, I'm going to ask you to brainstorm the last question in just a second, but there's two important players in the Constitutional Convention to talk. The first is George Washington. Of course, he is a war hero from the Revolutionary War. He's looked at as kind of like the founding father for his role in winning the war. And he's nominated as president or chairman, not of the country, but just of the convention. Real quick, when I say convention, what does that mean, convention? What's a synonym for convention? Meeting, discussion group. Yeah, right, coming together to decide things. So he's going to be put in charge of the convention, and he's not going to say much. He's going to have a lot of opinions, but he likes it first if he can convince people to join his side before he gets very vocal and loud. So he's not going to say much, but since he's so respected, he adds credibility to the convention because he's in charge. And he's very calm. As we have a bunch of different views on government, on the economy, on politics, on society, he does a good job of keeping everybody calm. Maybe the most important individual, though, at the convention is James Madison. He writes the Virginia Plan, which we'll talk about in a minute. He keeps very detailed, specific notes every day of this secret convention, every day, which allows us good insight into what happened later, because it's all done behind closed doors. And later, he's going to write the Bill of Rights as well. So that's why we consider him the quote-unquote father of the convention. So I want to ask you to, with your partner, brainstorm this first question, that last question on the first page. What struggles and obstacles do the leaders have to face in creating a new system of government? What are some of the different interests they're going to have to weigh? What are some of the things they're going to have to decide if they're going to start with a brand new government? Take a minute with your partner and come up with as many things or obstacles they're going to have to overcome. 1 minute, go for it. 9 minutes. Taxes are going.
Wait, what did you say?
Oh, just to have like
What? Yeah.
So what different competing interests?
And also like just trying to
What obstacles? Like, what do they have to solve?
like how are they
not as much
Government's
how are they gonna have stability? Like that's the biggest thing. How are they or not even how are they gonna force stability into like the power and like still like keep the people and
you give it to the people that stays like
they were
realizing
promised
that people
what
stay probably trying to have like a more like very
just thinking like how they're gonna do it in the first place. They all
like they have to make sure that they don't like tax
Right. So let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. What are some of the issues they're going to have to resolve or obstacles they're going to have to overcome? Stanford, give me something. What are they going to have to figure out? Sure, rights. Individual rights, states' rights, sure, yeah, rights. That's a good one. Voting! Sure. What are we voting for? The big issue. Sure. Members of the government, what are those called? representatives. So we got to figure out representation. Who's going to represent us in governments? How many representatives do we going to get? What's the representation going to look like? What's the rights going to look like? Good. What else?
I was gonna say, like, I guess in general, just how they're gonna build a new government that's gonna allow for these things, because they're making this whole thing from scratch, and just how they're gonna be able to keep like the correct balance, and like going back to your analogy from last week, like making sure that they have the right mix of things, just to make sure that they have liberty, rule, good government.
How are we going to find that balance? How are we going to divide? We're going to give the government more power, but how are we going to check that power? We can't just give them more power and hope they use it well, because you're still dealing with the same idiots. How are we going to divide the power? How are we going to check the power? How are we going to decide what you guys talking about? Taxes. Who can tax? Are we going to have a national tax system so we can like solve these problems? How about an army? Can we have an army? How about slavery? During the Revolutionary War, the northern states are in the process of abolishing slavery, and the southern states are not. So what are we going to do there? Bless you. So my point is, there's a bunch of other problems. Rural versus urban. Are we going to have a society that benefits people out in the middle of nowhere, or people live in cities? Are we going to have an economy that supports like agriculture, or that supports industry and manufacturing? Are we going to have a big, powerful government, or a small, limited government? How many rights do the states get to keep? There's a lot of, my point that I want you to, the phrasing I'd like to see in that question is there's a lot of competing interests. That a lot of different groups want their interests best represented in the government, and that's challenging to do. Once you finish writing competing interests, turn your page. It's good language, good A-push language. I like it. Now there's 4 major principles. Sure, why not? Go to the bathroom. This class is not important. I'm kidding, go ahead. There's 4 major principles. We talked about the ingredient list last week, and it's these 4 things they're going to have to incorporate into the new system of government. I'm going to have you guys and your partner talk about this in a minute, so don't try to write furiously. The first is limited government. How do we give the government power, but then limit that power? That's kind of a conundrum, isn't it? How do I give you more power to make sure you don't take too much? How do I ensure the government has teeth, can actually do stuff, but doesn't have too much power, becomes tyranny? Back to that balance we've been talking about. How do we give the government power, but also keep citizens' liberties protected? It's a hard balance, it's a very fine line. Second is republicanism. That's representation. How are we going to decide who can vote and what are people voting for? Where do we see democracy living in this new system? Third is separation of powers. We give all this power to the government. How are we going to divide it? Separate it? And the fourth is maybe the only new word up here, federalism. This is a big one. And this is the question of how much power does the national government have? How much power do the state governments have? Where does power live between those 2 entities? So I'm going to give you 3 minutes with your partner, and I need you to tell me more specifically than what, and these are pretty straightforward, why. My question asks you what and why. Why is it important that these 4 things specifically be represented in the new government? Why do we want separation of powers? Why do we want republicanism? Why federalism? Why limited government? Deal? 3 minutes with your partner. Get as much on that table as possible, and then we'll move forward. 3 minutes, go for it. Dive in. Why? Why those 4 things?
Yeah, I agree with you. Just
Why? Why those 4 things? Why are those 4 elements so important?
Like a check system, like making sure that like you said, like everyone has an equal balance of power, even in I think republicanism because just since it is like the idea that you should be represented in there.
2 more minutes. Why? Why federal? Why do we want to make sure states still have power? Why? Why?
Because it was so necessary to them as college in them.
Well, if you're leaving, how do you guys get in? Invite them over. Cool. You're good.
I guess they can like vote for people
Why? All four things.
We actually give them a representation.
One minute. And you know why for all four of these things? Why is it important that these four elements be incorporated into our government? You were talking about this. I know you know. You guys.
True staff, please pardon the interruption. We are currently right now in a soft lockdown. I repeat, we are currently in a soft lockdown. Thank you.
It's not leaving.
Make sure you put the hall pass as well.
I got it.
Where's Mr. Rivera? Put the wood.
No, we're fine. I got to teach. Shut up. It's not a hard lockdown. It's a soft lockdown. Calm down. I don't even know how to lock the door. Bro. Oh, no. We're fine, guys. We're fine. Oh, wait, what's it's your test in a week, so. Felix, shut up. Zach. So, why? I think the first three are pretty self-explanatory because we've already talked at great length about all three of them. But why federalism? Why is federalism such an important component of the new system of government? Why federalism? Dan, I'll take a shot at it.
I think just because like the whole premise of what even the title of our nation is, like the United States of America, so like making sure that we have like I guess a sovereign nation, but like within the nation just making sure that you have people who have their own identities and have their own state, and that they have their own liberty in that sense within a nation.
Good, right? Absolutely is true. The states are used to having all the power. So under the new system, we're going to make sure the states still have some power. Otherwise, what's the point of having a state? Otherwise, it would be one big country with no state lines. So it's important that we understand that like some things, I think it's also important as well. Some things are better decided at the state level. We don't need a national policy for everything. Who has an example of what's a good thing to have a state level decision for? Taxes is both, right? So there's some things that are shared. I pay California taxes and I pay national taxes. Lovely. What else? Education is very state specific. States have their own educational systems. You learn the California state standards because California decides what you guys should be taught, not the national government. Good. How about minimum wage? Minimum wage is a good one. It's way more expensive to live in California than it is in freaking North Dakota. So minimum wage should be higher here because life is more expensive. That's a more of a state decision. Yeah, absolutely. So it's important to understand that some decisions, that's why federalism is so important, are better made at the state level instead of having a national policy for everything. All right, now things get a little more specific, so I need you guys to buckle up. I'll make it crazy with you guys on these two plans. Buckle up. So, we have two plans that we'll dive into deeply, the Virginia plan and the New Jersey plan. Now, before I start, is Virginia a state with a lot of people or a little bit of people? All right, so it's a big state. So if they're going to have a proposal, is it going to benefit big states or small states? Because people are selfish. Nobody proposes something that's not going to benefit them. Have we talked about New Jersey at all in this class? No, because it doesn't matter. Right? All right? It's like New York City's armpit. Now, do we assume then, since we haven't talked about it at all, that it's a big state or a small state? Okay, good. Shmuel state. Yeah, there you go. Good. What are some other big states that have a lot of people? New York, good. Who else? Yes, some other ones. Virginia's literally already on the slide. What else? Pennsylvania. Massachusetts has a lot of people. Maryland not so much. Yes, California today. Good. What are some other small states that have a little bit of people? Rhode Island, South Carolina, North Carolina, Delaware. Yeah, Georgia's got like 19 people. Absolutely. Good. So the first question is, how are we going to decide representation? The Virginia Plan is written by Madison. It's good to have in your notes. It's written by Madison. And it proposes a much stronger central government. Under the Virginia proposal, Virginia Plan, the national government has almost total legislative control over over all the states. So the National Congress, the national legislative body, has all of the authority. That's kind of important. The bigger piece that I want you to know is what comes next. And Madison proposes a bicameral legislature. What does that mean, bicameral? Two parts, two houses, two groups, two this or that, right? And I'm gonna draw them all both out for you here and make it as clear as possible. It's gonna have an upper house. I'll put it UH, an upper house, and it's gonna have a lower house. Somebody at this point asked in first period, what's the difference? Don't worry, I'll get there. So two houses. Is anybody confused yet?
No.
And anytime you put bicameral legislature, if you're going to pass any law, they have to approve and they have to approve. So you need both houses' approval to pass any law. So what you do here is you build in a check on one branch of government within itself. So you're checking your power even before you even go to the other branches. Right? We saw John Adams' problems with single assemblies or unicameral assemblies last week, and you read his thoughts on government. Remember he said, like, what's to keep one assembly from voting themselves to be there forever? Because there's nobody to check their power within the assembly. So we've addressed that. Two houses, and both have to agree to pass any law. That's what bicameral means. Now, in both houses, it's going to be proportional representation, which means it's going to be based on population. So we'll put here, proportional representation. What does that mean? Who gets the most votes? Yeah, bigger states get more votes here and here. Of course, Virginia is the most populous state, so this is a great idea. So far, so good? So far, so good. Now, this is where it gets, so far, are the houses any different? No. Don't open that door, we're in a soft lockdown. What's wrong with you? Open the blinds, see who's out there. If you get shot, you get shot. If you die, you die. All right. So we have an upper house. Nobody died. An upper house. And a lower house. Are they different yet? Are there any differences yet? No, okay, cool. The lower house, I'll put the people here. Here's the people. Do we like the people? Are we worried about the people? A little bit. So we don't want to give the people too much power, because we're a little worried about the people. So far, so good? The people, they will directly elect the lower house. So they will directly elect, very democratic, here's republicanism, there it is. They will directly elect the lower house. This lower house, once they're elected, they will elect the upper house. So now the upper house has one layer away from the people. It's not directly elected, the people pick and those people pick. So ideally then you're kind of weeding out some of the idiots, if you think about it. Now, the part that really makes maybe the small states upset is that these two houses together, which are both based on population, they will together elect the president and they will elect the judiciary, all the judges. Now do you see why the small states would hate this plan? Because there's not one piece of this where the small states have any legitimate authority. They're going to lose out to population here, and therefore there and there. Now, part of that to me sounds fair. Don't live in a state with 19 people. Right? Why don't we base things on population? It's the most logical thing to do. But that goes back to the federalism argument, that we need to give some power to the states, and each state should be looked at legitimately. So there's the Virginia plan. I think it's pretty straightforward who benefits and why. Let's talk then about the New Jersey plan. It is a unicameral legislature. Didn't we already have one of those under the Articles of Confederation? Nod at me if that sounds familiar. Yes, good. So that part doesn't get changed. That's just like the Articles. I'll put it here, Articles. Just like the Articles. Each state gets one vote. Didn't we already have a system like that? What was it called? Oh, it's called the Articles of Confederation. Yes. Oh, what do you know? So New Jersey's over here like, hey, we got this awesome idea. It just failed miserably the last 7 years, but let's try it again. That's New Jersey for you. And their only real change, this part's great. They're like, we can do every state instead of one vote, every state can get 2 votes. And the big states are like, what the hell's the difference? It's the same thing. Whether you give us 1 vote or 2 votes, everybody's the same, everybody's the same. The only difference from the Articles, there's a couple other differences, but like structurally speaking, is that under the New Jersey plan, there would be an executive and there would be a judicial branch, where that does not exist at all under the Articles. It's just one legislature. It's all right, can't let him go. Stop lockdown. I'm kidding. Got it. No problem. Grab your homework on the way out. So, what I want you to do with your partner, because New Jersey plan is pretty straightforward, what does this debate, if this is the key, this is the biggest debate, this is the biggest problem, what does both plans demonstrate about the priorities of American political thinkers? If this is what they're fighting about, what does that tell us about American politics at the time? 1 minute, dive in with your partner, go for it. Question in front of you too. What does this demonstrate? What is this? What?
I was even saying that it's kind of just like the ongoing debate and like the whole thing and we need our representation, we need our equal power.
What does this debate demonstrate?
Just that society like that has like all different perspectives, that like people just need their power,
New government,
they need their position.
new system.
Government that government. So it's just there's that balance.
All right. So, what does this debate demonstrate about the American political system? What does this tell us? The fact that they're fighting this hard about this. Dolly, what do you think?
They wanted to change it because they don't want to go back to like the old, what they had before.
Okay, sure, that's not wrong. Take a shot. What do you
I
think?
think it shows that they view where everyone has equal representation differently. Because we see in the Virginia plan that they say everyone has representation, but they're taking votes for where the state that has a bit more population versus the New Jersey plan where they want each state to equally have a vote in the government.
So I think it's safe to say that just like the thing that caused the revolution in the first place, good job, that the biggest issue in American politics is representation. How do you best represent the public will without giving the public too much power or the government too much power? So it's important that, like, that's why I harped on this so hard before the revolution. We talked about like virtual representation versus actual representation versus the idea in Parliament. I mean, you don't need a vote because you kind of have a vote. Like that question of representation is still the key political conflict in America. It tells us a lot about where their values are. Now, who ends up solving it is a guy named Roger Sherman. Roger Sherman, and he's from Connecticut. So this is called the Connecticut Compromise. I'm telling you, English titles are all very Great or Connecticut. There's 2 names for this bad boy. You can use either one, doesn't matter. The Great or the Connecticut Compromise ends up solving this problem. And all Roger Sherman does is he kind of just smashes the 2 ideas together. He takes some parts of the Virginia plan, some parts of the New Jersey plan, and they just move on forward with it. Let me tell you what he did. I'm going to go back, because he's going to use the Virginia plan as a starting point. So I'm going to go to this Virginia plan over here that I drew out for you guys, and I will show you what changes in the Great Connecticut Compromise. Now, this part, the lower house, We're now going to, and now has a title. Now has a real name. It's called the House of Representatives. And I'm going to use this language all year, so you better be strong on it. The House of Representatives is the lower house, and it's going to stay exactly the same, just like the Virginia plan had it. It's based on population, so the more people you have in your state, the more votes your state gets in the House of Representatives. So it's based on population. Who does that benefit? Big states or small states?
Big states.
Good, good. And it's going to be voted on directly by the people. So far, so good. So just like the Virginia plan had laid out. The change is going to